On August 9, 2023, Honkai Star Rail released new characters as their tradition of releasing new characters for their gacha every 6 weeks. One of those characters is Luca. Luca himself was received fairly well by the community at that time. However, since Honkai Star Rail is a game revolving around their characters, character synergy and banter with previously existing characters were also added as part of the update. One character banter has been in discussion for a long while, though as it is infamous in the community. And that is a line from Zilla when paired with Luca in the same team. Have a listen.
あんたと組むの珍しいじゃない、ルカ。
Pair up with him? Ugh, alright, Luca. Let's do this.
I've put a translation subtitle in the video just in case people who don't understand Japanese, but I'm pretty sure without knowing Japanese, you'd have to know that the English localization for this particular line is wrong. Fortunately, this particular line was changed in a recent update for the game into this.
Pair up with him. Alright, Luca. Let's do this.
But nevertheless, this is infamously known as bad localization, which unfortunately plagues a lot of games from the eastern side of the world. Localization is when a piece of text that was originally in a language being translated into another language, in this case to the English language, and fits any manner of speech, culture, or anything that surrounds how you use the other language. There are multiple interpretations of what a bad localization is, but to me, a bad localization is when a piece of text gets translated and changed too much to follow the destined manner of speech or culture that it actively changes the meaning, context, and the personality of the character saying it. Localization is a huge undertaking since it is a job requiring you to not just know two distinct languages, but also have a deep understanding of both. I myself am having quite a difficult time learning Japanese for myself. Different languages not just have different vocabularies, but their manner of speech, grammar, basically any rules in their languages are different from other languages. So why am I bringing this topic of localization out right now? Well, because in the early release of its prologue demo, Metaphor ReFantazio has been brought up to attention because, allegedly, with two sets of dialogues, Metaphor ReFantazio's localization is bad. Now, to preface this very quickly, I am not an expert in the Japanese language, but as I've said before, I am learning it right now and is currently a JLPT N5 adjacent. So whenever topic of localization from the Japanese language like this got brought up, my interest peaked and I'd like to talk about it and judge whether the localization is good or bad. So let's look at Exhibit A with the haughty captain.
ああ、貴族出身？食うに困らんはずのやつがなんでここに？いいだろう。入隊は認めてやる。だが軍務では上官命令は絶対だ。死ぬことだって任務に含まれる。青臭い坊ちゃんに現実を叩き込んでやる。せいぜいお国のために死んで役立て。
Now, without a doubt, the English localization took a lot of liberties to change up the way the haughty captain speaks in comparison with the original Japanese text, which is pretty much why this series of texts got into the spotlight to begin with. That being said, the meaning of the passage is pretty much the same. The mention of blue blood, which is a slang for an aristocrat or a nobleman, is used to add flavor to the speech. The passage after he accepts his enlistment is practically the same as they convey that the commands from their superiors are absolute from the text in service of your country. Furthermore, it'll be your privilege to die screaming is also another way to say that death is included in the mission because people are conscious when enrolling as a soldier that they are going to die in battle, as it is a quote-unquote privilege to die. "War will turn your arrogance to piss" is a strong sentence that conveys the same meaning of "force the reality into this young brat," because arrogance is a product of young people not exposed to reality, and in the case of this universe, it is war. I could continue with the others, but I think you pretty much got the point already. The English localization for this passage changes a lot of text, yet the meaning of it did not stray too far away from the original. If anything, the English localization heightens the personality of the haughty captain by a lot. It shows that the captain did not like the young recruits' guts, because again, they're not exposed to the reality which turns them arrogant in the perspective of the captain. It gives a lot of the feeling of the higher position nobleman or aristocrat that abuses their power to get what they want. So to me, this piece of passage's English localization is a good localization. A great one in fact, because they managed to elevate the feeling a lot more than the original passage. Next one, let's look at Exhibit B with Gallica's piece of explanation before the captain's scene. Unfortunately, there's no voice in this, as it is not voiced, but the text comparison between English and Japanese do show some discrepancies. For example, the first sentence mentions dopey elder kid, which kinda insinuates that Gallica made a backhanded insult to the protagonist, which is an elder kid. In the grand scheme of things, sure, the meaning of the whole passage is the same, as it was meant for the protagonist to mind their own business and blend in with the crowd because of the background regarding his race. That being said though, this localization kinda makes Gallica somewhat of a quote-unquote prideful PC brat, and I don't think Gallica was written that way. It's rare for a small fairy companion figure in games to not be a squeaky, annoying kind. From the old Navi from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time to as further as Genshin Impact with Paimon, almost all of these kinds of characters have been stereotyped into the squeaky and annoying character trope. Gallica, in my interpretation, is not that though. Gallica to me is more of a sincere and helpful character, surprisingly straightforward as well, and only wants the best for the protagonist and to get things done without a hitch. Sure, there are instances when Gallica complains quite a lot when problem occurs, but her sincere and helpful nature in her character outweighs those by a lot. So to me, with the English localization skewing this and the second passage into making Gallica some sort of a prideful PC brat, this to me is a good example of a bad localization, because it adds a flavor to the text that changes the personality of the character. This opinion of mine unfortunately amplifies as I've played more into the game and found this other dialogue text a little later into the game. Have a listen.
あれ？私、眠ったはず。
I get why they're changing it to this humorous line, well, because it is funny, but it's annoying to me when reading this passage in English while hearing them saying it in Japanese, because it is a completely different sentence. And it further infuriates me that there is a moment in the game before this that conveys the exact same thing, yet they translated it perfectly. Yet, however, for the second time for this occurrence, you have to butcher Gallica's character into making her a PC complaining brat for the sake of humor, I guess, which is why I don't really like it. So, is Metaphor ReFantazio's English localization bad? To be honest, judging the whole game's localization from a few hand-picked lines would be disingenuous of me to call the game's localization bad. Localization in general needs to balance the accuracy of the translation and the change in the way of speech by adding those flavors into them. After around 40 to 50 hours of my playthrough, I would say that the English localization is not too offensively bad. The examples from the haughty captain is actually a job well done by the localization team, as it made the dialogue such a powerful conversation between him and Stroll, simply by elevating the personality of the haughty captain through way of speech. However, with the case of Gallica's lines, I don't think the handpicked lines were all that good because it strays away from Gallica's own built personality, a sincere, helpful, and straightforward character, into the stereotype PC and prideful character full of complaints. So to reiterate it again, the English localization is not bad, but it does have some parts where it poisons the well. Before closing this video, I'd like to mention to you guys what could have been a bad localization in practice to further prove my point on localization with a fairly recent game, Fire Emblem Engage. Fire Emblem Engage is notorious not just because it has bad and super cheesy writing, but also a really bad localization practice. Have a look at some of the examples here. Unfortunately, the characters Rosado and Goldmary gets the most amount of changes from this, but are not limited to them. The topic in this dialogue between Rosado and Luis gets heavily altered, presumably to avoid the discussion of gender identity of Rosado being a guy. The topic completely changes from Luis liking to observe girls from a distance in a non-creepy way to him liking to observe people socializing even if Rosado is alone. Take more dialogues from Goldmary, a character very proudful of her beauty, getting watered down to idle chats like looking forward to a bath, idle chatters when doing chores, and talking about being fit for war, while originally they're talking about attracting men with their beauty. Needless to say, these are bad localizations because they break both meaning and character, and the writing doesn't make any sense. And we know that the reason for this is because of censorship, although I personally don't think censorship is the cause here, because it doesn't make any logical sense why the original dialogue is kept in the Japanese script while it is heavily changed on the English side. Why are English players not allowed to have Lucina talk about envying a voluptuous figure while the Japanese can have that? Why do English etier have to be barbaric with "you're done right" while talking with Boucheron, but the Japanese side can have etier be the original princess-like mannerism with Boucheron, with "arigatou gozaimasu"? This is a perfect example of bad localization. Localization works are serious hard work though, as two languages, culture, and way of speech can't be 100% similar to each other. As such, we are in the ultimate task of balancing both context accuracy and flavorful writing within the correct culture and speech. As of today, there will be war between the accuracy purists versus the people who want good and flavorful writing in their games, not to mention the other side where they want to plaster their own agenda regardless of context. But I wouldn't want to talk about that. So, how should we perceive this problem on localization? Honestly, this is easier said than done, but the best way to combat this is to learn the language ourselves. Being educated on the two languages is a powerful tool to have. Being able to at least read or understand the original text is the better way to achieve accuracy in localization. But for the flavor on the text, it is mostly on your interpretation from knowing two sides of the spectrum, as you can judge for your own entertainment.